Many years ago, approximately 30 to be exact, I was in a city called Guayama, which is in Puerto Rico. And it was the first time I saw a miraculous healing with a gentleman who had been blind for 86 years. His two sons brought him there that evening, and he stepped in front of me. The two boys were able to speak fairly good English, so I didn't have a problem praying with this gentleman. I asked the one son, "What is wrong with your father?" And he said, "Well, as you can see, he's blind, and he's been that way for 86 years. Well, I told them to have him take off his glasses, and I stood there and I put my hands up onto his face and my thumbs into his eyes. And I didn't pray very long. And I wasn't expecting anything to happen, because you got to remember, I said this was over 30 years ago, and this was I was just not knowing exactly what I was doing in praying with people. This was all still relatively new to me. So when I placed my thumbs into his eyes, over his eyelids, I immediately could feel the heat in my hand. And I pulled my hand away and I looked at the guy, and he started blinking his eyes very fast. And I've come to learn since then that when they do that, they're starting to see light. And the longer he stood there, then he started yelling. And all he kept yelling in Spanish was, "I can see, I can see." And the boys were absolutely amazed. And he started running throughout the whole church. And I kind of had to let him go, because, who was I to stop him from being that joyous? And he went directly over to where the Blessed Mother's altar was, because he knew where that was, because every time he came into the church prior to that evening, he would go over there because he could smell the flowers. Now he said he was able to go over there and see the statue. Well, that would be fine if the story would end there. That was beautiful healing. But about 4 days later, I was sitting in the church in the afternoon, and the two boys came back into the church with their father. And I thought, oh, something must have happened. So they came over to me, and they're looking at me. I could tell that they had the same clothes on they had 4 days earlier, and they hadn't been shaved, and they looked pretty gruff. And I looked at the one son and I said, "Did something happen?" He said, "Yeah, we're bringing my dad back here so you can pray with him again." And I asked them, why is that? And they said, "We want to pray that you can make him go to sleep, because he's been up for 4 days and he won't go to bed because he's going everywhere, wants to see." So think about that. Here's a man who for 86 years could see nothing. Blind people call that, when they're totally blind, black. It means they can't see any speck of light. One moment he couldn't see, and the next moment he's seeing everything. And he made those two boys take them all over the island. One of the nicest stories that the boys told me was the first place he wanted to go was to the cemetery, because he wanted to see his mom and dad's grave, because when he would go there other times, he'd have to run his fingers over the tombstone to feel the names. And now he could see it. And the two sons said he stood there for almost a half hour, just crying and kneeling there in front of his mom and dad. God is a wonderful healer. And sometimes you have to wait for a long time before he gives you what you want. But here's a gentleman took him 86 years before he was healed of his blindness.